Erich Hartmann, known as the Black Devil of the Eastern Front, wasn't just the most successful fighter pilot in history, he was a living legend, a symbol of precision perseverance and tactical brilliance. Over the course of his distinguished career, Hartmann amassed an astounding 352 confirmed kills, more than any other pilot in history. All of those kills were achieved during some of the deadliest and most brutal aerial battles fought on the Eastern Front during World War II, where the stakes were highest and the risks never ceased. Hartmann was born in Germany in 1922, and like many young boys of his generation, he was fascinated by the idea of flight. His dream was to soar through the skies to become part of something greater than the ordinary life he knew. As a teenager, his fascination with aviation grew, and by the time World War II broke out, he was determined to make that dream a reality. However, his journey was far from straightforward. When Hartmann joined the Luftwaffe in 1940, he wasn't an immediate success. He struggled with some of the technical aspects of flying and faced difficulties in early training exercises. He was far from being the natural-born ace that many would expect. He wasn't immediately proficient in combat maneuvers, and his instructors were concerned. But what Hartmann possessed was something far more valuable than raw natural talent, an unwavering obsession with mastery. Rather than give up, Hartmann immersed himself in the study of aerial combat. He meticulously analyzed every maneuver, every weakness of his aircraft, and every possible advantage of his enemies. His dedication was extraordinary, and it paid off. Over time, Hartmann transformed from a mediocre trainee into one of the most skilled and deadliest fighter pilots ever known. What he lacked in initial natural ability, he made up for with a combination of perseverance, discipline, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. In 1942, Hartmann was assigned to the Eastern Front, where he would spend the majority of his career. At that time, the Luftwaffe was in its prime, and the skies over the Eastern Front were crowded with dogfights between German and Soviet aircraft. The Soviet Air Force, though vast, was still plagued by inexperienced pilots and outdated tactics. But the Luftwaffe, despite its advantages in numbers and equipment, faced its own set of challenges. Hartmann's early battles were not glamorous. He often fought against Soviet pilots who were better trained and more experienced. The Luftwaffe was vastly outnumbered by Soviet aircraft, and the odds were stacked against him. However, his early failures, rather than discouraging him, became stepping stones in his growth as a pilot. He quickly learned the value of patience, calculated strikes, and the art of stalking his prey. The skies were chaotic, but Hartmann's mind remained calm, cold, and focused on his singular goal: victory. He didn't just become a better pilot, he became a hunter. Hartmann's technique was simple, yet deadly. He would fly high above the battlefield, then dive on unsuspecting targets from the sun. His plane would come streaking down with unmatched speed, catching his enemies off guard. With speed and accuracy, Hartmann would fire a precise burst of ammunition, destroying the enemy before they even had a chance to react. He perfected the technique of boom and zoom, using his altitude and speed to his advantage, making each engagement quick, efficient, and devastating. As the months went by, Hartmann's tally of kills grew steadily. His early victories were marked by calm and disciplined air combat, avoiding the chaos of long dogfights and striking with surgical precision. His aircraft, a Messerschmitt Bf-109, became an extension of himself. He was a master of deflection shooting, where the trick was to lead the enemy aircraft to where it would be rather than where it was. It was a skill that required exceptional instincts and coordination, and Hartmann had both in abundance. In 1943, as the Soviet Union started to recover and improve its own air force, Hartmann faced new challenges. The Soviet pilots were becoming more experienced, and the Luftwaffe was no longer as dominant as it once was. Yet Hartmann continued to adapt, refining his techniques, staying ahead of his adversaries. With his exceptional reflexes and sharp instincts, Hartmann always stayed one step ahead, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The nickname Black Devil came from the terror he struck into Soviet pilots. His aircraft was easily recognizable, its fuselage marked with a distinctive black and white design. Soviet pilots learned quickly to avoid him, but even then, Hartman kept hunting. His precision was unmatched, and he became a nightmare for anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. The Soviets even issued a special reward for anyone who could shoot him down, but despite all their efforts, Hartman remained untouchable. By the summer of 1944, Hartman's score had risen dramatically. He was now the leading ace of the Luftwaffe, and his reputation spread far and wide. By the time the war in Europe was coming to a close, he had achieved 352 kills, a record that remains unbeaten to this day. But Hartman's success wasn't just a result of his skill in combat. It was also a result of his unmatched determination, his ability to adapt, and his mentality of always staying one step ahead of the enemy. Despite his fame, Hartman remained humble. He never saw himself as a hero. He saw himself simply as a soldier doing his job. He was always focused on the next mission, the next enemy aircraft to destroy. Even in the midst of victory, he maintained a stoic demeanor, constantly improving and refining his techniques. But as the war turned against Germany, things started to change for Hartman. By the end of 1944, the Luftwaffe was losing its grip on the skies. Hartman's kills continued to rise, but so did the number of enemy aircraft he had to fight. The Soviet Air Force was regrouping and becoming more formidable with each passing month. Despite this, Hartman continued to fight with unyielding precision. In 1945, with the war drawing to a close, Hartman was captured by Soviet forces and spent several years as a prisoner of war. His time in captivity tested him, but it also gave him a chance to reflect on his remarkable career. He never lost his fighting spirit, and he never gave up hope of returning to his homeland. After his release in 1955, Hartman returned to Germany, but his legacy as the greatest fighter pilot of the war had already been cemented. He was celebrated by many as a national hero, but he remained humble, always remembering the comrades he had lost and the sacrifices that had been made. Erich Hartmann passed away in 1993, but his name continues to live on in the annals of aviation history. His record of 352 kills still stands to this day, and his tactics and techniques continue to be studied by fighter pilots around the world. He proved that it wasn't just raw skill that made a great pilot, it was precision, patience, and an unyielding will to survive and win. Hartman's story is a reminder that in war, the most dangerous weapon isn't always the one with the most firepower, but the one who knows how to use it with deadly accuracy. Erich Hartmann, the Black Devil of the Eastern Front, remains an unmatched legend in the skies. His legacy lives on, not just in the history of air combat, but in the hearts of those who still study and admire his skill, his dedication, and his ability to turn the chaos of war into an art form. His story is a testament to the extraordinary power of precision, focus, and determination, and to the indomitable spirit of a man who would become the greatest ace in the history of aerial warfare.